The silence in a marriage isn't always empty. Sometimes it's a container. It holds the things you're too afraid to say, the suspicions you're too tired to voice, and the secrets that are slowly rotting the floorboards beneath your feet. For 10 years, I thought my marriage to Elena was a fortress, built on the solid bedrock of Midwestern reliability. We had the house in the quiet, tree-lined suburbs of Naperville, Illinois, a place where the lawns are manicured to perfection and the porch lights stay on until midnight. We had the golden retriever, Cooper, who still barked at the mailman every morning at 10:15 sharp. We had a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, but lately that heartbeat has been skipping. It's a subtle thing at first, like a glitch in a piece of code that you can't quite pin down. Elena started coming home late, her eyes bright with a kind of nervous, kinetic energy I hadn't seen since our honeymoon in Maui. She would walk through the door at 7:30 p.m., smelling faintly of a rain-scented perfume she didn't own, offering a distracted kiss that barely grazed my cheek. She thought I was the same old Mark, the reliable software engineer, the guy who worries about the water heater and the 401k. She thought I was looking at the TV when I was actually watching her reflection in the darkened window of the patio door. She thought I was clueless. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Here on Family Secrets and Revenge, we know that the truth doesn't just hurt, it destroys. It started with the phone. It's the classic trope of every failing relationship, the cliche that launched 1,000 private investigators. But when it happens to you, it feels like a brand new invention of torture. Elena used to be the kind of person who would leave her phone on the kitchen island while she went to garden in the backyard. It would sit there, face up, buzzing with innocuous notifications from her sisters in Ohio or the PTA group chat. I never looked at it because I never had a reason to. Then almost overnight, the phone became a vital organ. It became an extension of her hand, a permanent fixture of her personal space. If she left the living room to get a glass of water from the kitchen, the phone went with her. If she went to the bathroom to brush her teeth, it was tucked under her arm. If she showered, it was placed face down on the vanity, shielded by a hand towel. I'm a software engineer at a firm in downtown Chicago. I deal in logic, patterns, and anomalies. My entire career is built on identifying when a system is behaving in a way it wasn't designed to. And Elena's behavior was a massive, blinking red anomaly in the system of our lives. I remember one Tuesday evening, the autumn sun was dipping low over the DuPage River, casting long skeletal shadows across our living room. Elena was sitting on the sofa, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the screen. Her thumb was moving fast, scrolling, typing, reacting. Then she laughed. It wasn't the loud, boisterous laugh she shared with me. It was a small, private, intimate sound. "What's funny?" I asked, keeping my voice as casual as if I were asking about the weather. I didn't look over. I kept my eyes on the book in my lap, though I hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. She didn't even look up. Her eyes remained glued to the screen, her thumb hovering. "Just a meme Sarah sent. Work stuff. You wouldn't get the inside joke." Sarah was her manager at the boutique marketing firm. Sarah was also 62 years old, barely knew how to attach a PDF to an email, and most certainly didn't spend her Tuesday nights sending memes that would make a 35-year-old woman blush and tuck her hair behind her ear. I knew then. I didn't have proof, but I had the logic. The system was compromised. The atmosphere in the house shifted from a home to a waiting room. Have you ever felt that? Where you're sitting in your own living room, but you feel like a guest who has overstayed his welcome? We were just two people waiting for the other to say something, or perhaps waiting for the other to disappear. I began to notice the smaller, sharper details, the ones that act like paper cuts on your soul. There was the new perfume, something musky, expensive, and distinctly night out that she hadn't bought from our usual department store. There was the way she started going to the gym at 8 p.m. on Thursdays, a time when she used to be curled up on the couch watching Netflix. I'd watch her drive away in her white SUV, and then I'd wait. When she came back 2 hours later, her leggings were crisp, her hair was perfectly styled, and she didn't have a single drop of sweat on her face. She would walk straight to the shower, claiming she hated the feeling of gym germs. I felt like a ghost in my own life. I'd cook dinner, maybe a pasta dish or a steak, and we'd eat in a silence so thick it felt like we were underwater. The only sound was the clinking of silver against porcelain and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her phone and hurl it against the fireplace. I wanted to demand to know who was making her laugh when I couldn't even get a hello out of her. But I didn't. I am a patient man. I've spent my life debugging complex code. I knew that if I rushed the process, the bug would just hide deeper in the encrypted files of her life. I needed to see the full architecture of her betrayal before I made my move. I needed the logs. The breakthrough happened on a rainy Friday in October, the kind of Chicago rain that turns the sky into a sheet of slate and makes the wind howl through the eaves. Elena had forgotten her iPad at home while she went out for a girls' night with some old college friends. She'd changed her passcode on her phone, of course, but she'd forgotten one crucial thing. Our shared cloud account for the home security system was still linked to her tablet's notification history. I sat in my home office, the only light coming from the dual monitors on my desk. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird trying to find a way out. I opened the tablet. It was locked, but the notifications, the little snippets of text that appear on the lock screen, were still active. I wasn't looking for video. I was looking for the metadata of her life. There it was. Messages syncing in real time. A name I didn't recognize, Julian. Julian. I can't stop thinking about last night. In the way you looked in that green dress, it's burned into my mind. Elena. I know. It's getting harder to go back to the bored housewife act. Mark has no idea. He's literally in the other room watching sports right now. He's so oblivious, it's almost sad. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. If you were in Mark's shoes, sitting there in the dark and reading those words, especially the part where she calls you oblivious, would you have confronted her the moment she walked through the door? Or would you have waited to gather more evidence? Seeing the words, Mark has no idea, felt like a physical blow to the solar plexus. It wasn't just the cheating, though that was a jagged pill to swallow. It was the condescension, the sheer, arrogant belief that I was an NPC in her life, a background character who existed only to provide a steady paycheck, a beautiful kitchen, and a comfortable zip code. She viewed my stability as stupidity. She viewed my trust as a weakness to be exploited. I spent the next 3 hours downloading the logs. I didn't just look at the messages. I looked at the timestamps, the locations, the frequency. Julian, it turned out, was a lifestyle consultant she'd met at a gallery opening in the West Loop 6 months ago. A man whose entire job description was basically having an expensive haircut and telling rich people what art to buy. The messages were a roadmap of my own humiliation. Every time I thought she was visiting her mother in Hinsdale, she was at his loft in the city. In every late night at the office was a 3-course dinner at a restaurant I couldn't afford to take her to more than once a year. They laughed about my hobbies, my love for woodworking and coding. They joked about my boring taste in music. They were building a fantasy life on the ruins of my reality. They weren't just having an affair. They were staging a coup of my entire existence. Most men in Naperville would have packed her bags that night and left them on the driveway. Most men would have had a screaming match that the neighbors would still be talking about 10 years from now. But here on Family Secrets and Revenge, we play the long game. We don't just react, we orchestrate. I realized that if I kicked her out now, she'd go straight to Julian. She'd play the victim. She'd tell her friends I was controlling or unstable. She'd take half the house, half my $400,000 in savings, and she'd walk into Julian's arms with a smile on her face and a fat check in her hand. No, I didn't want a divorce. I wanted a dismantling. I wanted her to feel the cold, sudden realization that the man she thought was clueless was actually the one who had been holding all the cards the entire time. I started moving money. It was surgical. Small amounts at first transferred into an offshore account my brother, a forensic accountant, helped me set up. I started documenting everything. Every receipt I found in her coat pockets, every location tag on her private Instagram, every late-night gym session. I was building a case that would leave her with nothing but the clothes on her back and the lifestyle consultant she so clearly adored. The hardest part wasn't the discovery, it was the performance. Waking up the next morning felt like stepping onto a stage where I was the only one who knew the script had been rewritten. I watched Elena in the kitchen, the morning sun hitting the marble countertops we'd picked out together 3 years ago. She was humming a song, something upbeat, something Julian probably liked. She was making avocado toast looking radiant in her silk robe, while I felt like I was made of lead and static. "Morning, honey," she said, her voice light and airy. "You're up early." "Just a lot on my mind," I said, pouring a cup of coffee. I watched the steam rise. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. Not yet. And I had to keep my eyes on the code. Thinking about that new project at work. It's got a few bugs I need to squash. "You work too hard," she said, walking over and placing a hand on my shoulder. I felt a surge of literal electricity, not the good kind. It was the feeling of a predator's touch. I forced myself not to flinch. I forced my muscles to remain relaxed. This was the test. If she felt me pull away, the game was over. I reached up and patted her hand. "Someone has to keep the lights on, Elle. Besides, you seem happy lately. I don't want to bring you down with my boring work stress." "I am happy," she lied, her eyes flitting to her phone on the counter. It buzzed once, twice. "Just feeling good about life. Maybe it's the new yoga class." Inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was counting down the seconds until she left for her errands so I could call my lawyer. The clueless husband was a role I was starting to hate, but it was the only one that guaranteed my victory. By the second month of my investigation, Elena's confidence had turned into a dangerous kind of sloppiness. It's a common psychological pivot. When you believe you are smarter than everyone else in the room, you stop checking the locks. She was so convinced of my dullness that she stopped being careful with the paper trail. I found a receipt for a boutique hotel in downtown Chicago tucked into the pocket of her trench coat while I was putting it away. It wasn't just a receipt, it was a confession. 2 nights, room service for two, and a bottle of Cristal. Most men would have burned it. I took a high-resolution photo. He uploaded it to my secure evidence folder on the cloud and put the receipt back exactly as I'd found it, down to the way it was folded. One night I came home early and heard her in the master bathroom, the shower running to provide white noise. "But our house has excellent acoustics, and I'm a man who listens for a living," she was whispering. "I can't do next Tuesday, Julian. Mark wants to go to that anniversary dinner at Gibson's." "Yeah, I know, it's a chore. I'll have to sit there and listen to him talk about server migrations for 2 hours. I'll try to get out of it. Maybe I'll get a migraine around 7 p.m. Just be ready to pick me up at the corner of 5th. I stood on the other side of the door, leaning my forehead against the cool painted wood. I wasn't sad anymore. The sadness had been replaced by a cold, buzzing clarity. I wasn't just losing a wife, I was gaining a life. Our 10th anniversary arrived with all the ceremony of a funeral disguised as a celebration. I took her to Gibson's, the iconic steakhouse where the lighting is dim enough to hide 1,000 sins. I wore my best charcoal suit. She wore a deep emerald dress, the one Julian had mentioned in his texts. She looked stunning. It was a tragedy that her beauty was now just a tool for someone else's pleasure. We sat across from each other, a picture-perfect Naperville couple. To the waiter, we were success stories. To the couple at the next table, we were goals. "To 10 years, Elena said, raising her martini glass. Her eyes were bright, but they were looking past me, perhaps toward the door, or perhaps toward the future she'd already mapped out without me. "And on to the things we don't see coming," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. She hesitated, her glass hovering near her red-painted lips. The clueless husband had just used a line that didn't fit the script. "That's a weird toast, Mark. A bit ominous, don't you think?" "Is it? I just mean life is full of surprises, Elle. 10 years ago, would you have guessed we'd be exactly here? In this room with these secrets?" She laughed it off, a sharp, brittle sound, but for the first time I saw a flicker of genuine doubt in her eyes. The system was starting to feel the heat of the debugger. "Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in Mark's story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt that flicker of realization when someone you trust starts to act out of character? What was the glitch that made you look closer? The following week, the perfect window opened. My company was hosting a regional summit in San Francisco. Normally, I'd take Elena with me, or we'd make a weekend of it. This time, I told her the schedule was too grueling, and I'd just be in meetings and hotel rooms the whole time. I watched her struggle to hide her delight. She did a poor job of it. Her shoulders relaxed, and she immediately started talking about catching up on her reading and having some girl time. As soon as I pulled my suitcase out of the driveway and headed toward O'Hare, I didn't go to the airport. I drove 5 miles to a small furnished rental apartment I'd leased under my brother's name. I walked inside. He opened my laptop and connected to the private server I'd set up. 3 months ago, I'd installed upgraded security cameras in the living room and kitchen. I told Elena they were for the new smart home integration, but that I couldn't get the software to sync, so they were currently inactive. That was a lie. They were very active, and they were recording in 4K. She didn't even wait for my flight to supposedly land in California. By 6:15 p.m., a silver European sports car I'd never seen before pulled into my driveway. Out stepped Julian. He was exactly what the metadata had promised. Mid-30s, wearing a sweater that cost more than my first car, and carrying himself with the unearned confidence of a man who has spent his life navigating other people's bank accounts. Watching them on my laptop screen was a surreal and out-of-body experience. It was like watching a movie of my own murder. They were in my kitchen. Julian was leaning against my breakfast bar, drinking a bottle of the 2012 vintage wine I'd been saving for our next big milestone. They weren't even talking about love or passion. They were talking about the house. "We could knock this wall out," Julian said, gesturing toward the dining area. "Open it up. It's a bit suburban right now. A bit Mark." Elena laughed, leaning into his chest. "I know he has no vision. He just wants everything to stay exactly the same forever." What Elena didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have grasped, was that I had spent my extra hours at the office with a high-stakes divorce attorney in the city because of a very specific ironclad clause in our prenuptial agreement regarding moral turpitude and marital misconduct, a clause her own father had insisted on to protect her inheritance. Ironically, evidence of a long-term, calculated, and financially draining affair would be catastrophic for her settlement. I sat in the dark of the rental apartment, watching them plan the renovation of a house they would never own together. I wasn't angry anymore. I was fascinated. It's amazing how much people will reveal when they think the clueless person is 3,000 miles away. I watched Julian kiss her. I watched her lead him toward our bedroom. I hit record on the secondary server, saved the file to 3 different physical drives, and began the final phase of the operation. I didn't stay at the rental apartment for the full 3 days. I waited until Wednesday evening. I knew from the intercepted messages that they were planning a victory night, a quiet dinner at the house before Julian supposedly had to head back to his loft. I watched them on the live feed as Julian arrived with takeout from a high-end sushi place in the city. They looked comfortable. They looked like they already owned the place. I drove back to the house at 8 p.m., parking my car 2 blocks away behind a neighbor's overgrown hedge. I walked the rest of the way, staying in the shadows of the oak trees that lined our street. I let myself in through the garage, using the manual bypass so the electronic door wouldn't make a sound. The house smelled of expensive soy sauce and Elena's musky perfume. The sound of their laughter drifted from the dining room, as sharp and jarring in the space I used to call my sanctuary. "I'm telling you, Elle, he's never going to suspect a thing." Julian's voice was smooth, like oil on water. "He's too busy buried in his spreadsheets and server logs. Men like that don't look up. They just look down at the path in front of them." "He's a good man in his own way," Elena said. There was a pause, a moment where I thought I might hear a shred of remorse. Then she added, "But he's just so stagnant. He's like a comfortable old chair that you keep because you're used to it, not because you actually want it." If you were in Mark's shoes, standing in that hallway and hearing your wife compare you to a comfortable old chair while her lover laughed, what would be going through your mind? Share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. None of them I didn't rush in. I didn't scream. I simply walked into the dining room and stood at the edge of the rug, just outside the circle of light cast by the chandelier. Elena was mid-laugh, her wine glass halfway to her lips. She froze. The movement was so sudden that the wine sloshed over the rim, a dark red stain spreading across the white linen tablecloth like an opening wound. Julian looked like he wanted to bolt, his eyes darting toward the patio doors, but he was pinned between the heavy mahogany table and the wall. "Mark, you're you're supposed to be in San Francisco," she stammered, her voice 3 octaves higher than normal. She looked at Julian, then back at me, her brain frantically trying to find a lie big enough to cover the man sitting at our table. "The flight was delayed, I said, my voice eerily calm. The same tone I use when a system crash happens at 3 a.m. Then canceled, weather in the Bay Area. So I figured, why stay at an airport hotel when I have such a comfortable old chair waiting for me at home?" Julian stood up, smoothing his expensive sweater. "Look, man, I think there's a misunderstanding. I'm Julian, a friend of Elena's from the gallery." I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes on Elena. "No misunderstanding, Julian. I've been watching the 4K feed from the living room for 3 hours. The Sarah memes were a nice touch, by the way. Very creative." The color drained from Elena's face, leaving her looking older, sharper, and suddenly very small. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling, likely trying to delete the message thread that I had already archived months ago. "It's not what it looks like, Mark. Hi, we were talking about a project," she whispered, the tears starting to well up. It was the wife in distress script, the one she'd used a dozen times to get out of an argument. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. I pulled out a chair at the head of the table and sat down, gestured for Julian to stay seated. "Julian, the lifestyle consultant. I hope you have a very good lawyer, Julian, because Elena is about to become a very, very expensive lifestyle for you to maintain entirely on your own. You see, when the stagnant husband is a software engineer, he tends to keep very good logs." Julian looked small now. Without the protection of my ignorance, he was just a guy who had been caught stealing. He looked at the door, then at Elena, and I could see the exact moment he decided she wasn't worth the trouble. I reached into my laptop bag and pulled out a thick, leather-bound manila folder. I slid it across the wine-stained table. It landed in front of Elena with a heavy thud. "I've spent the last few months documenting everything," I said. "Every hotel receipt, every dinner, every late-night gym session. I have the GPS logs from the SUV. I have the metadata from your iPad. And most importantly, I have a copy of the prenuptial agreement your father insisted on." Elena opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the first few pages. Photos of her and Julian entering a hotel in the West Loop, transcripts of messages where they joked about my obliviousness. "Mark, please," she sobbed. "We can talk about this. We can go to therapy. I was just lost. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "You were never lost, Elena," I replied. "Show me you knew exactly where you were. You were in my house, spending my money and planning a life on my ruins. You didn't think I was a person. You thought I was a utility, and utilities can be turned off." The hyperventilation started then. Elena realized the scale of the disaster. She realized that the moral turpitude clause meant she was walking away with her personal belongings and very little else. Julian was already standing up, looking for his coat, his lifestyle consultant, persona, completely evaporated. "You can't do this! 10 years, you're just going to throw it all away?" she shrieked. "I'm not throwing it away," I said, standing up. "I'm debugging it. I'm removing the corrupted data so the rest of the system can function again." I looked at her phone, which was still on the table. A calendar notification popped up. "A reminder for next Tuesday." I smiled. It was the first genuine, unburdened smile I'd had in half a year. "Oh, and Elle, I saw your note about next Tuesday. You told Julian you'd have to get a migraine to skip our anniversary dinner so you could see him. Well, I've saved you the trouble of lying." I walked toward the mudroom, grabbing my bag. "Go ahead, call him. Let him know you'll be free next week, and every week after that. My lawyer will be served your papers at 9 a.m. The locks are being changed as we speak." I walked out of that house and I didn't look back at the suburban dream that had turned into a nightmare. The divorce was a surgical strike. With the evidence I provided, her legal team didn't even try to fight the misconduct clause. She got her clothes, her jewelry, and a very modest payout that wouldn't last her a year in the city. I kept the house, the savings, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing you're no longer the fool in the room. Last I heard, Julian disappeared the moment the lifestyle became too expensive to maintain. Elena is living in a small studio apartment near the airport, working a job she hates, while I've turned her former hobby room into a high-end woodworking shop. They thought I was clueless. They thought my silence was stupidity. But in the end, I was the only one who saw the whole picture. I was the one who controlled the narrative. Thank you so much for watching this story on family secrets and revenge. Betrayal is a bitter pill, but sometimes it's the only medicine that clears your vision and shows you who people really are. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and revelation, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to join our community. It helps us keep bringing these stories of truth and consequence to light. What would you have done if you found those messages? Would you have played the long game like Mark, or ended it right then? Share your overall thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. I read every single one. See you in the next one.